Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this session of the Student Undergraduate Research Experience. This is a module that belongs in the entrepreneurship series that has been offered to us from Research Excellence and Innovation. And today we're going to be talking about a lean startup model. It's called Business Model Canvas. And with us, we have Dr. Chris Bowman and Dr. Erin Kulhawy, and I'm going to transfer my notes right over to them. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Merle. Chris, did you want to do a quick introduction of yourself? Or do you want to jump right in?
I have myself muted, sorry. No, I'll just jump right in. I'll do it when you hand it.
Okay, sounds good. So thank you, Merle, so much for having us today. I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk about Business Model Canvas, what it is, why it's important, why people should even care about it if they are thinking about starting a company. Maybe I'll start my screen share right now and get that going. Can you see my screen?
Looks great, Erin. Thanks so much.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to talk about the Business Model Canvas and sort of everything that we know about it. We are part of the office called Research Excellence and Innovation, as you mentioned. So I'll tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, who we serve. That'll be the starting point. And I think it's important because if you do have an idea, if you are thinking about your own research, it's good to know who to talk to, what we do and how we can support you. So I'll go through that just very briefly. Then I'm actually going to take a couple steps back from the Business Model Canvas and get you thinking about the process for understanding what the opportunity really is for your business or for your technology. So you have an idea, but what are your options for commercializing? And what are the things that you should think about to figure out whether or not you should commercialize and this is an opportunity? So we wanted to take a few steps back, talk about that. And then this is where we sort of fork in the road and we're going to talk about the business model canvas and having a business plan. And so this is where you've decided to become an entrepreneur, you're really excited, but where do you start? And having a plan is important. So we'll talk about why it's important, and then Chris will really get into the business model canvas and why we think it's a really useful tool for creating that, that framework for your business plan. So who are we? What's REI? I've talked a little bit about it, but we are Research Excellence and Innovation. We used to be called Innovation Enterprise if you've interacted with us before, but under either name, we sort of do the same thing. And really, we're here on campus to serve faculty, students, staff, and anybody that's an innovator, an entrepreneur, and wanting to commercialize their research. So we sort of get in at the ground level and support at that idea stage. People come to us with an idea, and we really work with researchers to identify if that idea is really a business opportunity, if there is a commercial opportunity there, and if there is, what the path for that might look like. So what are the different commercialization strategies? How can we map that out? And so we work closely with inventors to start developing that process and outlining what that looks like. And we also work externally with funders, industry partners, and investors, and we connect them with researchers. And this is an important aspect of what we do because the university is a really great place for where ideas are born and where they're sort of created and incubated. But ultimately, the goal is to take those ideas and get them out into the community where they can really create the impact. And a lot of times, these funders and partners are that vehicle to get those technologies out into the world. And so that's really an important piece of what we do, is making those connections. And we make the connections as we see appropriate. So we build on this understanding of the technology and the strategy and fit the partner to the technology. So we sort of interface with all these different aspects. And like I said, we start really early on at the ground level, working with researchers who have an idea. And that's kind of where what leads me into this first part of the talk is, so you have an idea, this is fabulous, and this is a great place to start. But this is really where the work begins when it comes to commercialization. And it's a long road, and I wanted to share this slide. If you're looking at the messages, it's saying most ideas don't make it to market. There's a big gap between taking an idea and making that into a product, and then making that product into a sale. I'm not sharing this to scare you or deter you from from going down the commercialization route. But I think it's good to sort of set the stage and set the expectation that commercialization is not an easy feat. And do you know the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child? I think equally, it takes a village to raise a technology, and sometimes the gaps in the work that needs to be put in is not always appreciated. So we're going to share some of these things with you today, and some of the things that you need to think about in order to fill those gaps. I also wanted to mention, we're not going to be talking about patents really a lot today. That's another session down the road. But I did want to mention that just because you do have a patent doesn't mean you have a viable business opportunity. And the opposite is true. Just because you don't have a patent doesn't mean there's not an opportunity there. So really, we're going to talk about some of the other things that you need to start thinking about as you're developing a strategy and understanding if you even have an opportunity to commercialize. So you're here, you have an idea. What do you need to start thinking about? What is this work that I'm talking about? What are the things you need to consider? And this is where we will often work with inventors on campus to answer some of these important upfront questions. So this is really determining where you begin is finding out whether or not there is an opportunity. And so these are some of the questions. It's not an exhaustive list of questions you'll need to ask yourself, but these are some of the main things that we start to think about when we're evaluating an opportunity on campus. So things like, does your solution address a market problem or a market need? And this is really getting at the question of, are you solving a problem for your customer? Do you know your customer? And this is important because sometimes there's a disconnect between what you're doing in the lab or on campus and that person at the end who's actually going to use your product. And so it's important to understand what those customers' needs are and how big that customer segment is. So do you have 10 customers? Do you have 1 million customers? That sort of sets the stage for understanding the opportunity. And I will say that bridging the gap and getting to know your customers is a really important aspect of developing a business, because you can pivot. And instead of failing because you haven't met a need, you can pivot and maybe create a product that does fulfill a need. And so it's a really important piece to consider early on. Another thing is, do you have a minimum viable product? So do you have an idea right now, or do you actually have some information that says that your idea is going to work? So an example of this is if you're creating a drug, for example, and you have a compound. Do you have some data to show that maybe in an animal model it alleviates some symptoms of disease? At this stage, you don't have to have, your end product, and it's not expected that you'll have an end product, but it's good to have some data to show that your hypothesis is actually working and working in the way that you want it to. And then does your invention have advantages over the competition? So do you have competition one? What is your competition? And this gets at the question, answering the question for your customers, why would I buy your product over this person's product? What's really the unique aspect of it? And this is something you will get asked over and over again as you develop your technology, as you look for investment. And so this is something to think about early on and consider. And then the final thing, maybe not the final thing, but another thing is your invention patentable? And like I said, it's optional. You don't have to have a patent to have a good business opportunity. But what you do have to do is start to think about what your intellectual property is, so that you can really put a strategy around that. You understand what you have and what the value is in your technology. So these are all the things that you could start to consider once you have that idea percolating in your mind, right? Do you have all the necessary things to make a decision about commercializing? And if you've ticked all these boxes and you say, yes, this is a good opportunity, I think I want to commercialize. The next question is, what are your options for commercializing? And there might be more options than this, but these are sort of the two main options that you'll have. So it's not just company creation. There's an option to also license or assign your technology to another company or partner. So these are the two sort of main routes that you can take. And when you're licensing or assigning your technology, essentially what you're doing is you're handing that baton over, and you're allowing somebody else to use your intellectual property and commercialize that in exchange usually for some sort of financial return. So this usually comes in the form of like a royalty. So if that partner sells anything using your intellectual property, you'll get a percentage of what they sell. Your partner is usually going to be a larger company that has the means to grow and scale this technology and actually sell it in the marketplace. And that's essentially what you're doing when you're licensing, is you're sort of handing on that commercialization. So you've taken it as far as you can in the lab. Company creation, on the other end, is just taking on ownership of your technology and furthering development yourself. So you're creating a company, you're becoming an entrepreneur, and you want to lead the development of your technology. So in this case, it's not always the end goal to become like this multi-billion-dollar corporation and sell globally. That's not always possible, but often the goal is to de-risk that technology further, to incubate it a little bit longer within your company, create greater value for that technology, and then at some point you hope to become acquired by a company or license it out to a company and hand off that technology so that it can become sort of sold in the global market space. So you have options, and these are sort of the two main options that I wanted to talk about today. The next question you might be thinking is, okay, I have options. I can license or I can create a company, but what's the best option for me? How do I make this decision? Where do I even start with that process? And I just wanted to share a bit about some of the pros and cons for licensing and assigning versus company creation. Just some things to think about while you're making that decision. And these are also things, again, all of these things are things that we work with inventors to sort of answer along the way as well. So I put this together. This is probably not an exhaustive list of pros and cons for each, but it's sort of the things that came to top of mind for me when I was thinking about this. So when we're looking at licensing, usually, so some of the pros are that if you're looking to get your technology out quickly and you have an established partner, that technology might make it to market faster than if you were to try and do it yourself. Another pro is there's reduced time. You're handing your technology to somebody else, so they're then taking on all of the responsibility for commercializing. So you don't have to put in the resources and the time and the effort to do that. So that might be an attractive thing for you because you might not want to do that on your own. And then you're creating, or you're getting this passive income. So if they are making sales, then that income, whatever percentage you negotiate, is coming back to you. The cons are that it's often difficult to license early stage technologies. So technologies that I would say this is particularly true for life sciences that have a significant research and development timeline. And so oftentimes licensing just isn't an option early on. There's other models that you can use. You can collaborate with industry partners. I'm not going to talk too much about that today, but sometimes licensing just isn't an option. If you do license and you license early, you often see less of a return. And this makes sense because you are taking less of the risk on, so you're going to get less of the reward. And then, you have less control over your technology development. So you're handing that on again. And the partner is going to decide where they want to commercialize, how they want to commercialize it. So that's licensing. On the flip side, company creation, some of the pros are that there might be greater financing options for you. So there are granting government grants specifically for startups. You can reach into venture capital funding potentially, things like that. So there's other opportunities for startups that don't exist for research groups. There's maybe a larger return if you are successful. So if everybody loves your product and you get it onto the market successfully and you're making a lot of sales, you stand to make more because you've taken more of the time to incubate that technology and understand the value of it in the marketplace. And then obviously you have greater control of your technology. So if you really want to guide the development yourself, this is maybe the option for you because you have a bit more control over that. And then cons are high risk of failure. So the stat that's sort of in my brain is around 60% of startups will fail within 3 years. And I think that number just grows. So it's a really risky business. There's multiple reasons for startups to fail, and we can chat a bit about that. But if you're a risk taker, then maybe this is for you. But there's also added business costs. So things you need to think about are, now you have to pay for your patent costs. You probably have to pay for legal fees if you have contracts that you need to get signed. Maybe you need space for your lab or for your office. Maybe you need personnel. So there's added business costs on top of the research and development pieces that need to happen as well. And then there may be time taken from academic activities. So if you are really focused on your academic work and not wanting to put the time into creating a company, it is a lot of work. It's a full-time job. Sometimes you can get a team and delegate, but there is some time that's going to be taken away. So I just wanted to present these as pros and cons. So it is a personal, I think it's as much a personal decision to start a company as it is a strategic business decision. So it's good to sort of understand some of these pros and cons. There are also, I wanted to share this with you. It's a stat about the 10 most sort of invested in sectors in the US by venture capital, just to show that there's some sectors that sort of lend themselves to the startup model a bit better than others. And you can take software as an example. It's a nice investment opportunity, depending on what it is, but software gets a lot of investment because there's not a ton of capital up front that's required, like it would be if you were going to develop a drug. Oftentimes, these companies can scale quite quickly, and then these investors are getting a faster return on their investment. So you see that there's a lot of investment into software, and even in the healthcare space, I think I've seen a growth in digital health companies in the past few years, and the investment that's going into them for a lot of the same reasons. They can get their product to market quite quickly. I don't mean to say that there's these other opportunities aren't good startup opportunities, because they certainly are. It's just different reasons for investing and maybe different times for incubating those technologies in the company. So take biotechnology for an example. There's actually a lot of investment in the biotech space. One of the reasons that investors like it is because if you hit and you have a great idea, you get a huge return on your investment. So if you make a blockbuster drug, you're going to make billions of dollars. So maybe the risk is worth it if you think there's something really good there. But one thing to consider is those technologies might need to be incubated a little bit longer. So you may incur business costs for a little bit longer if you're looking to exit at some point. So just some interesting stats to keep in mind as you're thinking about your own opportunity and the different pathways that you might take for commercialization. So now we're here. We're at the point where we've weighed the benefits and costs, we've identified a market need, we have a product, and now you're at the point where you've decided you want to be an entrepreneur, you're super excited, you're probably pretty scared, but you're really motivated and you want to start a business, which is a great place to be. But the next question would be, okay, I've never done this before, how do I start? I'm going to tell you that there's no right or wrong way. There's no one, maybe there's a right or wrong way, but there's no one answer that sort of encompasses all types of companies. There's not like one magic recipe to start a company. So the one thing I do think that all successful companies have in common is a good plan. And that's really where we're going to get into the meat of a business plan and why it's important. So you need a plan, just like any sort of goal that you want to hit in your life. A good plan is going to get you there. A business plan is just a different type of plan that maybe you haven't encountered before. So what it really is this framework for how a company is going to create value for itself while it's providing its products and services to its customers. So it's important for things like clarifying your strategy, identifying potential roadblocks or gaps and filling that with resources, and then evaluating the overall viability of your idea. And it's important because investors will oftentimes use these business plans as a way to evaluate your business opportunity and whether or not they want to invest in you. So having a good business plan is really important for looking to get investment into your company. And I wanted to show this because I think it nicely illustrates the importance of a business plan. I've highlighted that the need or lack of a business model accounts for about 70% or 17% of the reason why startups will fail. But if you look at some of the other sectors, like there's no market need, you ran out of cash, you don't have a good team or the right team, there's poor marketing, All of those things are sort of consequences of not having a good plan. And so I think not having a plan actually accounts for a lot more than the 17% here. Um, and so, you know, it just is highlighting the fact that a good plan can take you far if you have a good product. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris now, who's going to talk about the business model canvas, which is a nice tool to help you build a framework for a plan. And yeah, so Chris, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Erin. I'll just unmute myself here. And I guess, I mean, yeah, we'll keep sharing the same screen, and you can try to anticipate slide changes if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries.
And see how that goes. So yeah, I'm also with REI in the same office as Erin. We have very similar roles. We all look at pushing university technology out to partners who can make it into products or services, because that's not really what the university does. Our core role is research and teaching. So when technologies, innovations, inventions come out of the university that look like they have potential to show up in a product or service, we want to engage external partners or create external partners in the case of startups that we can pass that over to, and they can pull it forward beyond the university's mandate. So one of the tools we like to propose people look at, as Erin says, a business model, a business plan is very, very important to get some success out of or to maximize your chances of success out of the enterprise. And business model canvas is a nice tool to do this in a really lightweight, nimble kind of way. So business plans, if people are familiar with them, are often associated with these 100-page documents with projections, financials, far into the future, numbers that maybe you don't have a good handle on, but that you need to build out to try to get investors and so on online. And in the early stages of a business, you're often pivoting, you're often looking for, well, that isn't exactly what the market wants, because I'm going out and talking to the market. We got to do things a little bit different, and then you have to start your business plan over or make significant changes to it. So the business model canvas is kind of a tool to do a lightweight, quick and dirty, I guess, business plan that can then be built out to a full business plan when that's necessary. But it gives you the sort of the core components that you really need. So it's easy to understand, it's flexible, it's identifies how the business has to connect internally, and it's easy to communicate to external people that you need to talk to, whether it be suppliers or investors or what have you. And so it's just literally a big canvas with a bunch of areas on it, and I'll go through each of these areas in more detail. But it's list a bunch of bullet points in each of these sections and move around across the canvas and see how they interact. So it's always nice to start with customers, even though it's sort of not the upper left-hand side of the business model canvas. The first thing you need to worry about in a business is, who are your customers and what do they want? They don't exist for you, you exist for them. And you need people that have a need that they need to fulfill, and think about how you're going to satisfy that need. And it's always the case that what you think people want is always a little bit different than what people actually want. And one of the sort of themes is, you can't theorize what your market is going to be. You need to go out and gather that information. So this is this is a bit of a segue off the edge of the business model canvas right now, but I wanted to dig into customers because it's really the key to the business. So there's multiple steps in sort of acquiring customers. The first being figuring out who your customers potentially are, making some educated guesses, some hypotheses. It looks a lot like the scientific method of who needs what I'm providing. If I'm an app developer and I'm making a app to track, I don't know, intensity of exercise or something. Who am I marketing this to? Am I marketing it to people running triathlons? Am I marketing it to this sort of average person that wants to get in better shape? Am I marketing it to people with different sports focus? Like who are my customers, and who really needs this? And the goal is to get your minimum viable product worked out. And like I said, it's very much like that. We're good.
Okay.
To move forward, yeah, it's very much like the scientific method. So you start with a hypothesis. I think a certain segment is going to be interested in what I want. You design an experiment to verify that. You test it by interacting with the people who you think are your customers, and then you get some insight from that and go back and refine your hypothesis and run through the circle again. This is all coming from the lean startup methodology that was popularized and really developed by a guy named Steve Blank. So there's a bunch of information you can get out there if you want to dig more deeply into this. There's books, there's web pages, there's all sorts of videos and so on related to Steve Blank, lean startup, and so on. And I encourage anybody who's sort of interested in taking a product to market to dig into that a little bit. Okay, back to the canvas. So you have some idea, at least a first hypothesis of who your customers are. So now what am I giving them? How is this going to help them, and why do they care? It gets a little bit like it becomes a little bit brutal almost internally to say, I need to offer people something that they actually want, and it people will say it's very ego deflating when you think you have something, and then you go out and you realize that it's not quite what people actually are willing to pay for. So there's lots of different ways to determine what your value proposition is. Some businesses compete on price. Is Sobeys or Superstore or Independent or whatever, are you going to get a cheaper basket of groceries? But it's not just that. Some compete on convenience, some compete on design. Apple's built a whole empire on good design. Performance, freedom to customize, the ability for the customer to sort of get exactly what they want. There's all sorts of ways to distinguish yourself from competitors, and there's always going to be competitors. We talk about patents and IP protection and building a competitive moat is a phrase sometimes you'll see, but regardless, even with sort of brand new platform technologies, there's always going to be some kind of alternative, whether that simply be that people don't engage at all in this particular space or what have you. So it's important to be able to distinguish your value over what else people can do to get this need addressed. So once you have your idea of what your value is and what your customers are, how do you find them? Are you going to be an online store? Are you going to be a wholesaler? Are you going to have an army of door-to-door salesmen going out? What are your channels? How does your product get to the customer? And then related to that, on the next slide, is how do you develop a relationship with their customers? And these can be very, very different, right? Amazon's relationship with its customers is very different than the relationship that the restaurant at the end of the street has with their customers. One is much more personal. One is much more sort of streamlined to involve as little personal interaction as possible, right? Amazon wants to automate as much as they possibly can about your interaction with the company, because that allows them to serve the biggest possible market with in the most efficient way they can. And all of this comes together on sort of the right half of the business model canvas on revenue. So this is how your business is making its money. So what are your customers going to pay for? How are they going to pay for? When are they going to pay for it? You know, is it a subscription service? Is it a one-time model? Is there a service contract? Are you selling a service? You know, business model canvas has to be flexible to all kinds of businesses. So there are many different options for revenue streams. But all these four pieces: the customers, the value proposition, you know, how you reach the customers, how you relate to the customers, is all related to bringing funds, bringing revenue into the business. And then the other side of the canvas is going to be about how you deliver with that. So what do you need? You've decided through your customer conversations and through looking at your value proposition what your minimum viable product is. So this is a notion, again, that's very popular in the lean startup methodology, which is going to market with the something that you can sell, something that will be able to succeed in the market, and nothing else. So it's always very tempting to add bells and whistles and flourishes and extra features and so on. The lean mantra, the lean methodology is no, don't do that. Make it as simple as possibly can, but no simpler. So it needs to be a viable product, but also minimal. So everything you need, but nothing you don't. And there's all sorts of resources that a company might need. So the first place people often think is money. So what do I need to get this thing off the ground? But the point of the money is to acquire the other resources you need to get things off the ground. You need people, you need employees. Do you need IP? You know, is there something that's patented or protected in some other way that you need access to make this company go? Or do you have your own, and do you need to protect that? So physical resources, you know, do I need a factory? Am I building, you know, desks or chairs or whatever? Am I going to need to have some way to put these things together? Human capital, intellectual capital, all that stuff is the you know, what does my company need in terms of resources in order to execute on getting my value proposition to my customers? And what do I have to do? So there's the key resources, or what do I have to have, and activities are what needs to be done. What you know, what R&D has to be done to get things moved on? What relationships do I have to develop? What do I have to do now, and what can I do in a month, and what can I do in a year? What you know, it's this is the project management side of the business, right? What has to be done when, and what depends on what else getting done. And who are the people you need to work with? This is often something that startups maybe don't put as much thought in, because it's often seen as sort of we're pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps and everything we have is what we have. But if you need suppliers to get, you know, components built and put together, who are they? Do you need to have some backups? Can you be reliant on one supplier? There's always the stories, it seems every couple of years, that you know, a typhoon hits Taiwan and computer memory or hard drives or something is not available, and that just echoes through the whole supply chain for electronics, and you know, potentially drives companies out of business, especially if you're small. If you're competing with, you know, a Dell or an Apple to buy components, you may be at a disadvantage trying to acquire things if the market all of a sudden dries up a little bit because there's a disruption in supply. So who do you need? Who's building your components? What happens if you lose them? And then all the other stuff. Do I need legal resources? Do I need somebody to do my taxes, do my bookkeeping? Do I need advisors? Do I need a sales force? Can I outsource that? Any of that stuff. And then again, it comes back to a question of funding, and do I need investment? So you've in the sort of other sections of the business model, you're starting to get an idea of what you have to buy and what you have to hire, who you have to hire to get your product out to market. Now you know how much money you're going to need to get things off the ground. And then the question becomes, where am I going to find that money? Am I giving away, this is the common way of doing it, am I giving away pieces of my business, a percentage of my business, part of my ownership, in order to get some funds in to build it to the point where it's a functional business that has a product in the market? Am I looking for loans? Am I looking for non-dilutive funding? There's a lot of organizations out there that will help businesses get off the ground, whether it be, IRAP is one of the big ones. That's the National Research Council's Industrial Research Assistance Program, I think, that helps technology businesses get off the ground with funding. Yeah, you can move on. And once I have an idea, so the right hand side is all about customers and delivering your product and revenue and getting your product into the market. The left hand side is all about what do I need to do to create the product that I'm going to get into the market. And then the real accounting is, can I deliver my minimum viable product in such a way that I actually make more money selling it than it costs me to make it? So where are my costs? What are my costs? What's driving my costs? What's upfront? What's fixed versus variable? What's upfront versus ongoing? And which key activities are the most important? What do they get a cost? And can I adjust my costs and my revenue expectations so that I have enough money coming in to keep the lights on, make a little bit of profit, and grow the business? So I find it's nice to have some sort of concrete examples here, and I take the sort of example of a business that everybody's familiar with, and effectively I'm going to leave this as a exercise for the listener. Think about your childhood lemonade stand. This is a very toy model of a business, but it has a lot of the pieces that you need. You have customers, you have supplies you need, you have activities that have to get checked off. Maybe there's no intellectual property in your lemonade, but regardless, you have most of the key points. So I'll invite you guys to think about lemonade as a business model, and here's sort of a sketch of what the business looks like. You have your lemonade, which you deliver to your customers who are outside in the outside world. You've acquired these customers, they give you money, which you capture and use to create more lemonade. And there's the sort of business cycle right there. So it has all the sort of key elements of a functioning business, even though it is very, very simplistic, but it's a good place to try to look at the various sectors of the business model canvas and just try to fill in to give yourself an idea how you think how you understand how it all works out to get those points on the canvas. And just to sort of reiterate and remind and kind of close here, there's these sort of two internested cycles going on, basically, in the way the canvas is laid out, and everything sort of runs out of your value proposition. You develop customer relationships through your customer channels, which feeds revenue into the business, and then on the other side of the canvas, you take those funds, you execute your key activities in collaboration with your partners and create the thing that you're trying to deliver, and it all cycles around on and on, hopefully growing off each other. So I think, I'm going to move on here. Again, this is just a reminder of the highlights of the business model canvas. It's a flexible, easy to understand thing. And once you have the segments filled out, you can take that and generate the basics of a sort of more comprehensive, more formal, let's say, business plan. But you don't have to. So we ran this Summer Entrepreneurs program a few years ago, and we had teams of students come in and look at the possibilities of commercializing some of the university technologies, and we'd have them do a new business model canvas every week. So they would go out, they would talk to people, they would look at who wants a product or service that can be derived from this technology. They would put together sort of the hypothesis, sketch out a business model canvas on it, and then go see what the numbers were, go see what people might want to pay, how enthusiastic they were about it. And oftentimes there were huge pivots, right? So people would start looking at a market where they thought their customers were, um, you know, resellers, greenhouses or supermarkets or something like that, and then realized that's not really what my customer segment is. My customer segment is actually, somebody further up the supply chain or somebody further down the supply chain. Maybe I should be going direct to consumers rather than working through a middleman. And then when you do that, everything changes in your business model. If your customer is if you're selling plants to a greenhouse, your customer relationships, your customer distribution channels are going to be very, very different than if you're selling plants at a farmer's market. So everything shifts, everything adjusts, but the structure of the canvas is that you can do that pretty easily. So we had people iterating this thing over and over and over again. And I think that winds it up. Yeah, so that's where we wanted to end. Gives us a little bit of time for questions to either Erin or myself. And I thank you all for showing up. And if you want more information, you can contact us, or I invite people to search Business Model Canvas, because you'll find a lot of resources on that, or the Lean Startup Methodology and the Lean Startup Methodology from Steve Blank and some others, and go from there.
I was just doing exactly that, Chris. I'm like, okay, business model canvas. What does that look like? And
billions of hits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it even has its own Wikipedia page. There's all kinds of images.
Yep.
Yes, there's tons out there. So I recommend that.
There's only so much you can do in a 45-minute presentation.
No, and that's okay, because the thing is that you're talking about why we need the process, which is really, really important. And I really like that explanation of how you sent these groups of students out, in the entrepreneurship summer series, and they did some of that work, because, and then to come back and read, and okay, this part needs to change, then that changes this and this and this, and it's really quite fascinating. Does anyone have any questions? You can feel free to either put them in the chat or send them to me. What I'm going to do is stop the video. Thank you so much to both of you, but then we'll allow the questions to come in even after that.
And while people are thinking up questions, just to comment on what you were saying there with the entrepreneur program, that it's really interesting, because university technologies are often, their technologies are something that came out of a lab, and to go from that to sort of envision how it would show up in a product, there were a lot of different directions things could go. So things went, if I have one product was a lubricant. So what are you going to use this bio-based lubricant for? Are you going to use it to lubricate farm machinery? Are you going to use it to lubricate a chainsaw? Are you going to use it to lubricate? It's all over the map, right? So does it mix in with other stuff, or do you do it by yourself? So there were a lot of directions to pursue.
I can't even imagine. I own a farm, so I'm like, oh yeah,
right.
There's so many reasons why we need that. Is that
exactly.
Bio-based and oil-based industries still have a major part to play in our modern industrial world. That's for sure.
Exactly.